All right, welcome everybody back to the Goldmine Podcast, and today we have our friend Paul Galushkin, and he is one of my favorite business peers in the community. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Of course. Why don't you introduce yourself to the listeners and just kind of give a basic overview of, the story, as personal or unpersonal as you want, and then we'll get going.
Sure. Well, I live in Auburn. I've been in Auburn since 2020, but originally I'm from Ukraine. I was born in Ukraine. I'm from a family, one of 13 kids. My parents had 13. We came here in 1993. I was 8 years old, but pretty much grew up in Sacramento and started working when I was still in high school. I actually did not go to high school. I took homeschool because I was thinking, hey, when I turn 16, that's when I get my driver's license. I want to buy a car because I knew my dad was not going to buy me a car. He's not going to.
Well, what number child were you out of the 13?
So I'm third. I have two older sisters, but I'm firstborn son. So I made a plan that I'm going to work. If I can get my schooling done through homeschool, I'll earn enough money to buy my first car, and that's exactly what happened. So I started as a floor installer working with my dad, then eventually moved up and opened up my own flooring business. And around 2008, that's when I got married to Tatyana, who's also my business partner right now in multiple businesses. And when I got married, that's during that year is when I started being more interested in the real estate.
Okay.
Even though the real estate market started collapsing, I was reading books on real estate. Tatyana was already licensed, so she had some background in real estate. And we made a decision to go into real estate together as a team. So we opened up our own brokerage in 2011. And I, at that time, obviously before we opened up our brokerage and after I got married, within those few years, I got my bachelor's in business finance, and I also was working at a local credit union bank. I only lasted there 9 months.
Yeah.
Felt like I was in the prison. So we started real estate as a company, as our own brokerage in 2011. At first, it was just us working with few investors, finding them the deals, listing their homes. And then it evolved into us flipping our own homes, buying investment properties, building new homes from scratch, custom homes, and then recruiting more agents on our team. And just during that whole period of time, understanding business, and at first it was, we were very young. Me and my wife, we could hustle 12 hours, 16 hours a day. Then once we had our first son, we started having kids, and we realized that it's just not going to be sustainable.
Right.
So we started looking at everything that we were doing in terms of how can we actually build a business, not just a
job that you own.
Job for ourselves. So, up to now, right now, we have multiple businesses. We're growing our brokerage. We have set up certain systems and people in place that now we can look at it and it's like, yeah, we're not as involved in the day-to-day, but our business is growing.
I love this story. And what I hear specifically that I think probably relates to Charlie and I is the importance of the factor of family as it infuses in your career, right? So the influence that having a kid, your first child together, how that influenced the way you had to think about business, right? Because as you said, now you had to figure out how to accommodate for something else that you want to do correctly, which is be parents.
Absolutely, because I've watched a lot of dads over my period, over life. Watched some of my friends and relatives, and most of them, their dads, they weren't really involved in their life. They went out and earned a living so that they could pay their bills. Most of them were either truck drivers or just construction workers who went to work early in the morning before the kids woke up and came back already late when kids were asleep. And the fathers weren't really involved. And I made a commitment to myself, and even before I got married to Tatyana, we would talk about things like this, like, hey, this is kind of how we see life. Here's our values, and that's what we were finding out, that we have a lot in common. And one of those things was like, we want to be involved in our kids' life. We want to be there for them. We want to go to their games. We want to take them to school whenever possible. And I knew that, for me, it would not be, possible to be there all the time,
Sure.
But I started thinking, like, what can I do right now that by the time my son is already, going to school, start school, that I can do something. I can make some moves in order for me to have more time.
Right, because when you have a kid, like a newborn, you sort of have like 5 years before they get into school too.
Yes.
Right.
They're babies, they're at home, and it sort of gives you a hard deadline, if you will, to get it figured out.
Yeah, it's a very sobering moment when, I will remember that day when I was holding my son for the first time. My wife had a C-section, so the doctor was fixing her up, and I was holding him. And I'm looking him in the eyes, and he's like trying to look up and find my eyes. I guess, they don't really see that well at the very, but just this understanding hit me at that moment that, hey, there's no going back from this. Like, this life right here that you're holding, like, you are now responsible for this life. So it was just a surreal moment for me. It changes. Like, I talked to some guys who are in their 30s and early 40s, and they're not married, they don't have any kids, and I can honestly say that I feel bad for them. I feel sorry for them because they haven't experienced something that is so important in a man's life.
Right.
I don't know, how about you guys? I mean, I know both of you have kids, and more than I do. I only have a son and a daughter, but it's something that I think every man should look forward to.
Yeah, and Charlie and I both share a lot of those feelings and sentiments, and I think, I beat you to 4.
Yeah, you beat me to 4, and then I just kept going.
But I will say, every time we were blessed with another child, it was, for me, a new level of motivation. We all know motivation is fleeting, right? You have to be tough too in your career, otherwise it won't grow. And you can't just rely on motivation only, but it does help when you have it. And I felt like every time we were blessed with another child, it was like, especially for me, because we had 4 kids, and they're all within. So I have 4 kids. So all within like five or so years. They grew up pretty tight. And so it was just, and we were younger in our 20s, and it was pretty rapid fire. And so every time it was sort of like cranking up the temperature a little bit more before I ever really acclimated to the time before. And so it was like boot camp for me, like adulthood boot camp. And then to have a business partner too, who it was like, every time he had a kid too, it was like, I also felt a responsibility to come to work every day and do my best, even for the sake of his family.
Right.
Wow.
Because when I do better, their family benefits. And when Charlie does better, my family benefits. Right. And so now between us, 10 kids, it's like, you got to perform.
Yeah.
And
Well, you guys are a great team.
thanks, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, and we work well together, and we've had a lot of discussions that were heated, but we kept everything glued together, and we always press forward and all this. But yeah, I'm really glad that you shared that, part of your story too, because one of the questions I wanted to ask was, I feel like at some point we all sort of have like an entrepreneurship awakening, if you will, where, maybe for you it was like you said you worked at the credit union, it felt like you were in prison, and maybe that was part of the awakening. Also, part of it was bringing a child into the world, and I know for me, it was realizing that even though there's a lot of quote unquote risk in entrepreneurship, you either can take that path or you can stay in the path of, I have to trade my time for money only now. And if I stick with this, that's how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And on top of that, my job security really isn't that secure because I'm not in charge. And I actually don't get to make decisions for my future. I mean, try hard, work hard, do your best at work, but ultimately you're not guiding the machine. You're just a part of it.
Yes.
And it's important for everybody who's on a team that's not running it to, I think they should acknowledge that too. Not in a bad way, but in a good way and in a bad way. Like, know that your role here is important and you're contributing to an important team. But also, like, don't abdicate your responsibility and think that you're going to be taken care of just because you have a job.
Oh yeah.
That's dangerous.
No,
Right.
Yeah. What I would say is that it all depends on what you're solving for, right? So for some people, the security of having a job, consistent income, not having to worry about making payroll next month, not having to worry about, are we going to have our next clients, coming in through our door, like not having to worry about that. Maybe they in the past observed or saw something that influenced their mindset like that. We're like, yeah, I don't want to be in this position. Give me security, give me stability. So they're solving for that, right? So they're constantly looking for a better position, whether it comes to them or they're out there searching, right? And if they, make, $80,000, $100,000 a year, and this is their, like sweet spot, comfort zone, yeah, and they're good with that, it's fine.
Sure.
But if these people are looking at their neighbor, let's say, or their relative, and they are making 5 times or even 2 times, 3 times more than they are, but they feel envy or like how you guys are, somehow are lucky or whatever, right? And they attribute that success or that they have more to some sort of luck,
right?
Then there's a problem there, because that means that you want that too, but you settled because you don't want to do what it takes, and you don't want to take those steps maybe that your neighbor or your relative did in order to achieve that success. For me, when I was working at the bank, to be honest with you, even though I felt like this job is not for me, I'm just here temporarily, when the situation happened and I did not voluntarily leave. What happened was I'm not going to go into details,
sure,
but very weird situation happened, and I got a call from the manager, and she said that we're going to have to let you go,
right,
because of that situation. I was mad. I was upset that and I was almost about to start fighting to get
Yeah,
that
right.
position back.
Right.
Even though you didn't even like it.
Even though I didn't like
yeah.
it, it's like it was just weird. And then I kind of looked back the next day, and I was remodeling a bathroom in the place where we lived, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, there's no way I can go back there. It was miserable. Like, this is an opportunity. Like, this is the door opening, the door that I've been waiting for to open. Like, and that day, like, I had this epiphany where it's like, no, I'm actually glad that this happened, because now I have an opportunity to go in the direction that I always wanted. It was just I wasn't really sure when to make that move. And during that time, 2010, that the market wasn't really correcting.
Right.
It was still really flat. There was
Yeah.
a lot of foreclosures, a lot of short sales, and almost anyone I talked to about real estate, they were like, whatever. Either their family or they got burned,
Yep.
and they did not want to have nothing to do with real estate. But here I am. I'm like, yeah, I'm getting in real estate at this time right now, when nobody wants to do anything with real estate. I want to get it. It's just, and it was the perfect opportunity that came during that time, and that whole situation with me losing that job
Right.
was the beginning of something so much greater. And I know that if I would have maybe stayed there, and even if they only figured out how they can keep people like me, like, they would do things a little bit differently. They would give more frequent promotions, or entice people to stay, like, just
Maybe have
incentivize-
things be less rigid even.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then they could have people who are sort of like entrepreneurs, but they'll stick around, because they're giving him just enough for them to want to stay, So
a lot of the corporate environments, they don't know how to give space for that creativity to thrive. It kind of gets suffocated, and they're gonna get people to replace the seats, the jobs, and it's like,
Well, that in a large point is because the corporate goal is not disruption. It's, hey, can we predict what's going to happen in 3 months? Can we predict what's going to happen in a year?
yes, if you control everybody.
Right, exactly. And so it's like, okay, well, there's, again, that security path. It's like, cool, I can have predictable growth because everybody does exactly what I expect them to do, and there's no deviation, there's no risk. I mean, there's never no risk, but it's like less risk. A couple of years ago, I was listening to a podcast from Silicon Valley tech founder, and he was like, I only hire entrepreneurs with the understanding that they're going to start their own business in 3 years, and I'm not going to have them anymore. But I want my business to not be safe. I want my business to be innovative. And the only way I can get that is to hire people who are going to leave me in 3 years, because they're going to have a great idea and they will be able to do more with it than they would be able to do within my business. But I want them during that time.
Wow. Yeah.
I think that's actually, it reminds me analogously to nature, and how, like, I don't know, like, flowers spread throughout the world because, like, the birds spread the seeds, sticks to their feet or whatever, or like it's in their beaks, and it's like those entrepreneurs are like the birds, and they're bringing their ideas and their innovation, and their development skills, and dropping them as they go. And it's like, now you got flowers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's an interesting way of looking at it.
So it seems natural, but I think actually having pure control in order is actually anti-natural.
Yeah, definitely.
And yet, most of those corporations, those companies, they exist, and it works for majority of people.
Yeah. Yep.
So for you, it sounds like, okay, yeah, you had a flooring business, and that then came like the real estate effort. And do you think it was during building up that business, your real estate brokerage, that did that open your mind to the idea that, hey, we could have, I don't know, a few more businesses too? Where did that the idea of that growth in that you were going to have multiple businesses come into play, did it have to do with success in real estate, or did it have to do with something else?
Well, when we were doing just real estate just by itself, there's different ways that we earned income from doing real estate. So one way was if we represent a buyer or a seller, we earn a commission check. Right. That's a typical real estate agent, the way they make money. Then there was a profit from a flip, right? We buy a house for $100,000, we fix it up for $30,000, we sell it for $200,000. Pay your capital gains tax, you have your profit. So we started making money that way as well. Then we started buying vacant lots, and we would work with an architect, develop a house plan, and then by the time we were doing that, I was already a general contractor. And so once volume increased in commission sales, in flips, and in new construction, we looked at those three things as three separate businesses.
Got it.
So it wasn't just that one business, right?
Right.
So, and then each of these businesses had their own unique lessons that I've learned about what it is to have this business exist and thrive and make good money and profits, be profitable. So then my mind started going like, well, if now that I understand these concepts in business, in the business world,
right,
most of these business principles and the way you run a business apply to almost any industry, right? So I had this issue that I had to work on. First of all, I used to say yes to almost every opportunity that came my way. And I realized that was a problem, because I would take on certain projects, I would partner up with certain guys, and even though there was some money that I made at the end, sure, I looked at like how much time I spent on, and like some of the projects weren't all that profitable, but I did look back and I say, why did I say yes to this? I should have said no to this. Yeah. So I began being very selective as to like where my time is going and which opportunities I say yes to. So when it came to, let's say, the wellness center that we opened up in El Dorado Hills, I was not looking for another business to start. I wasn't looking, to get into the wellness industry.
Right.
But what kind of influenced me to say, hold on, let me listen here and find out a little bit more, is I always believed in holistic way of,
staying healthy. Yeah.
Staying healthy, right? Taking care of your body, So when I heard that this is a way where you're being proactive, these are not pharmaceuticals, prescription drugs, the way our healthcare system here in America is it's mostly you're treating symptoms.
It's like a sales pipeline for medicine.
Yeah. You're going to the doctor. He's looking at the symptoms already, and like, well, you have high blood pressure. Well, take this pill. It's a diuretic. It's gonna get rid of most of your water, and then if that's not gonna work, then let's work on your heart. And now we're gonna
it's reactive.
Alter the way your heart is pumping. It's but not where they're like, well, what is your lifestyle?
Right.
How do you live? Is there stress? What's your diet like? Right. So anyway, when the opportunity of a wellness center came, and I heard about it, I paused and I said, I want to learn more. What is this business model like? What does it look like? Do I have time right now to find out all the information that I need in order to make a decision?
Because that would be the first business that you purchased, you didn't build, right? From nothing.
Well, there's a little bit of both. So
okay.
It's a franchise model, right?
Sure.
So we bought the franchise, and we had to look for a location here in Sacramento region where we wanted to open up. So it's almost like starting from scratch, because you got to find the location, then you got to improve it, right? Do all the TIs, tenant improvements.
You still have to find the talent.
You got to find the employees. You got to buy all the equipment. You have to set it up, decorate it, furnish it, create, like, so it is sort of, it's just the benefit of having a franchise here in this business is that there is already, you're not starting something that you have no idea whether it's going to work or not.
There's workflows.
There's already a proven business model, what kind of products are being sold, what kind of equipment needs to be in, the pricing strategy, marketing strategies, and all that. So like the industry was already mature enough for me to feel comfortable getting into it. Right. So, but, it was still like a new business. But I knew that all those principles that I've learned in business, in the real estate, in the construction, most of them all apply here as well. Right. And a lot of it is how you serve your customers, your clients. Right. What kind of marketing you do, the creating systems so that, and hiring the right people so that you don't have to be there all the time. Right. Managing everything. Right. So figuring out all of these things was already something that I had some experience in. Right.
And I feel like, and this is part of what I like about you, is that you do embody the spirit of always building on, always adding to, so it's like you took all your previous knowledge, and that you didn't just sit there with that. You kind of still had an openness to more opportunities, and then you were able to, apply that past knowledge, and now you're going to learn more with this business too.
Yeah, actually, I did not mention this, but I think it's important to say this. For those people who maybe they listen to this story, and I saw this another opportunity, and I went all in, and everything just worked out, Yeah. Mm-hmm. There are certain moments that most entrepreneurs do not like to talk about, but they do happen. So we get invited to a wedding, and the CEO of Arctic Elevation, that's the name of the wellness center franchise, it's his wedding. He invited us to a wedding. It's in Phoenix, Arizona. Super hot out there.
Ironic.
Where I actually,
for cryotherapy.
This was my first time in Phoenix, and I don't they had an outside wedding, 3 p.m.
Wow.
Oh man.
112 or something degrees. Everyone was just sweating. But anyway, we go to the wedding, and me and Tatyana went. We fly in. We go straight. We already dressed up because we had only a few hours, so we flew in. We go to the wedding right before they start the
ceremony.
No, the ceremony was done right before they
reception.
Move on to reception.
Yeah.
We quickly have our meal before the meal gets served, and we're back on Uber and back flying home. We could not stay there longer, but out of respect we wanted to go to the wedding, right?
Sure.
Right.
So we did that. But I flew back. It was already late at night, and I'm going to sleep, and my mind is just racing. I'm like, okay, we're supposed to open up our location by July, because that's when our $10,000 lease payment is going to start being due.
Yeah.
We still have to figure out who we're going to hire. We have to do all this paperwork, like all these different licenses, because we're talking about IVs, injections and all that. So, we got to make sure we get all the necessary insurances,
You say this was May or June, the wedding?
The wedding,
it was probably around.
It was around June or something.
Yeah, so you got about like a month or so.
Yeah, we're still like in the construction process, right? Like the supplies, all of the equipment for actually us to like open up and start serving customers, clients. And I would say like that evening, that night when I went to sleep, I had probably at least a couple hundred things that I'm like, oh, and this needs to be solved, and and how are we gonna do it? What if, what if this, what if that? And it was the moment where I'm like, what the hell did I get into?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Right.
why did I take this on? Like, I could have just like went to sleep right now peacefully, doing what I know very well how to
Sure.
do,
Mhm.
Sure.
and it's at those moments where you have situations like that where it's like those moments either make you or they break you.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Like you
it's-
can grow through that,
yes,
or it can crush you.
yes,
Yep.
Yeah.
yes, and a lot of very often this happens in here in your mind, and
Yeah.
and I did not next morning get up and share this with Tatyana.
Mm-hmm.
How can I do that? She's got her own things to worry about and take care of, taking care of the kids, in school and stuff. So I'm not telling her this,
Sure.
I'm sort of just processing everything. And the thing that really helped me is I read a few books about like how to basically the concept of like really living in the present, and how the situation that you are evaluating or you are in, it's only as bad as how you respond to it.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, I'm sort of panicking right now. My response is not healthy because I don't know that all of these issues are out there. What if one by one in the next 30-40 days we will handle it? And I'm like, wait a minute, okay, let's say we don't open in July,
Right.
and our lease payment is due.
Then what?
Then what? We have a little bit of cash, that we can, or we
Runway,
can go
yeah.
borrow. Or what if even better? What if I make a phone call tomorrow to the company, the management company, property management, and ask them, hey guys, can you give us one more month? We were gonna open, but it's just not working out. There's a few delays. We gotta figure certain things out. Hey, let's do that.
I think, Paul, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think that a big difference between somebody who just works and somebody who is an entrepreneur is that entrepreneurs, I sense, have a little bit more control with their imagination, right? So our bodies emotionally don't know the difference between whether something's real or imaginary, right? So if you dream something, you have feelings because of it, or something happens in real life, you have the same feelings.
Right.
So it is fascinating to think that when you choose what thoughts you're going to imagine, that will kind of dictate what direction your momentum goes and your energy flows. And because that thought leads to a feeling, and that feeling leads to another thought, right? So I believe that entrepreneurs when they're in a good space, they have the ability to put their foot in the door, stop the pattern, and at least open their mind to another option. And because you had mentioned like, oh, what if I make a call and it goes right? Like there was one point in our business where I had this creative idea to make somebody an offer to get our first office space in exchange for free for a year. So our first office, we didn't pay rent in.
Wow.
It was for a year, and we exchanged work. But I said, what if I call and make the offer? Well, if he says no, he says no. We're still where we're at.
Right.
But if he says yes, now we have a place to run our business out of. And we don't have to worry about what we can or can't afford. This is like in the beginning when it was like bootstrapping from zero, And
Wow.
I always remember that example because even though we're way, way further than we were at that point in time in terms of how well financially our business is doing, there's still dark days. There's still days that suck. And I find it just as hard now as ever sometimes to get back on the track that you're talking about, which is like the one you're choosing on purpose to manage your mind.
Right.
And that's really interesting because the way you react in situations like that and where you choose your mind to go, this is something that it's hard to learn for kids like in schools.
Yeah.
Right? They don't really teach that in colleges, right? But when you are in the right circle of entrepreneurs, people who have built businesses or are now building a business, if you're in those circles and everyone is just being open and sharing, their experiences, or even if you're reading books,
Sure.
right? Biographies of those who have, who have made it and are well known. Like you will learn a few things and you're like, oh wow, so that's right, huh? What if next time I'm not gonna respond this way, because a lot of it is just we are always thinking what's the worst case scenario, and our mind always wants to go to
the survival instinct.
Yes, that survival
and it grips.
Absolutely.
It grips.
Absolutely. And also, entrepreneurs, business owners, those who succeed, they have a high tolerance for stress.
Yeah. I mean, it still makes your hair go gray, but I can't control that part, and that might be a myth, but
well,
I always think about that. Like I got a gray hair for every,
There's a solution to that. Just cut them all off.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, this guy already solved for that.
Easy for you, man. Oh, so you got through it, that obviously super stressful period of time, and through basically trying to take control of your imagination and of your mind. And I assume it was like you took action on one of those thoughts and it yielded some positive result, which probably encouraged you to keep trying that. Because, I mean, it's either that or roll over and quit.
Well, the one thing I did not mention earlier is that I was raised Christian.
Mm-hmm.
So very often during these times that I experience tough situation or a decision, I do pray about it.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I invite God to help me make the right decision and guide me through it. So even if I did not find a solution at that moment where I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to do, there's still belief in me that it's going to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Something's going to happen and it's going to work out, right? And going back to even how I was starting in the real estate, I wasn't licensed when I kind of started dabbling in the real estate.
Right.
But I saw this guy was flipping a lot of houses. And I said to my wife, Tatyana, she had access to MLS. And I said, can you log in? I want to check something out. Show me how to check this agent's production, meaning what he buys, what he sells. And then show me how to check who's buying it and selling it, right? Who's the investor? And I'm looking at, there's a name that always pops up, And I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to make a goal right now for myself to work with this investor, to bring him deals.
Right.
So then I'm like, okay, can I bring him a deal right now? I start looking at what's on the market, and there's this short sale on the market for almost a year. Nobody wants to buy it. And I said, hey, I called the guy because I found out his phone number. I'm like, hey, there's this house. I know you flip houses. You might want to take a look at it. If you remodel it, it can sell for this much. He's like, yeah, I'm open to looking at it. So just that step alone is really what I would say was one of the building blocks to the rest of the things that happened in that, it was just that. It was that thought that I'm going to find this guy a deal and I'm going to work with this guy. He's going to become my client.
It's the spirit of experimentation. In it's experimenting with, what if I try this? What if I try that? And specifically, that often looks like a conversation with another person.
Yeah.
I mean, as business partners, at one point, it was me being like, hey, we should start a business. And you being like, get lost. That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And you're not wrong, but, it can be terrible. But at the same time, it was like, well, now we can build on something. And it's all that. It's all the experimentation. And you brought up faith, right? And it's sort of like, there's a few ways to look at faith, but like, to me, it's like, sometimes I think about it as like the ability to move forward with like scientifically unknown certainty or uncertainty. It's like, well, look at all the things that we've done that had uncertain futures on the other side of that ended up not only fine, but for the better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's, sometimes people call it patting yourself on the back or, giving yourself credit. And I think oftentimes I forget to do that. But when I do that, I feel like it's a way to build confidence too. It's like, don't forget where you came from, because you've come a long way.
Mm-hmm.
There's that. And then there's the other aspect of, I think we're all Christian here, and it's no matter what happens, there's somebody who's wiser than all of us, who's got his hand on the controls. And so I just got to do what I need to do in the moment. He's put me here. He hasn't put me here to see everything. He's put me here to act in a certain way. And maybe I won't ever see the results of that. Maybe that's going to cause something way over here to happen. And it's like, okay, well, I didn't know that, and I couldn't see that, but I moved forward in a way that I felt he was calling me to. And
doing the right thing is doing the right thing.
And even if I don't see it, then I have confidence that it was the right thing. And that's a huge win in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, we always get tested, right? There's always, like, if we want to grow, if we want to evolve, if we want to improve, we have some kind of a goal. Like, we have to pass certain tests to graduate, to get to that next level. And if there's a test that we're constantly failing, we're not going to get there, even though, we have aspirations, and we want to achieve something. But if it's this journey, the journey of hero's journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was just reading not too long ago in the book of Kings in the Bible, David's journey.
Right.
I mean, this guy, goes and with a stone destroys Goliath, and now everyone's singing praises to this guy, right? Like, it's almost as if and he got anointed to be the next king, right after King Saul. Looks like everything is just perfect. Just go on, right? Then what happens? And then
Saul's really angry at him.
I mean, to just look at like his whole path before he actually became king, and how he was reacting to in different moments, even though, like, when the guy's like, hey, he's right there, like, just kill him. Like, God is giving you this opportunity, this golden opportunity. He's been trying to kill you so many times. Just destroy him right here. He's right here. This is all God's setup. And he said, I'm not going to raise my hand on the anointed one.
Right.
And it's like, and then he was pretending to be sick. Remember that moment where he was pretending to be crazy so that the other king does not recognize that this is actually David, the guy who killed Goliath, and going through all this humiliation, and that's kind of how a journey is. It's almost in everything. Like, you look at whether you want to achieve, health, wealth, relationships, right? You want to, like, everything, there has to be a point where you're sacrificing something.
Right.
And very often it's super hard to do.
It always takes away from your comfort, It's like
always.
It's something like, if you ask yourself the question, how do I live an authentic life? To me, the first thing that comes to mind is I accept exposure, right, to my vulnerability. It's like accepting vulnerability. And that, for me, I mean, weirdly tying this back into like career talk, is I had jobs before I started this business, and the hardest thing to accept, like I longed for a more authentic life, and I knew that I didn't belong in the cubicle, and I had to come to terms and accept the fact that to live more authentically and be involved in my career more authentically, it meant that I had to always face exposure, because that was the most real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And being protected inside of the cubicle, if you will, was like the least real thing, and that's why I felt so dead.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And so to me, exposure and authenticity are like two sides of the same coin. And so, and I think that that's also a very Christian theme,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. You're being honest, and when I don't know if do you guys talk often between you and Charlie?
Sure.
About what you're meant to do
All
in
the time.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the topic of like purpose.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I recently went outside, and maybe if I shared this with you before, then I'm sorry. But
No, it's good.
I went outside. I usually don't wash my cars or trucks, but I went out and I wanted, because my truck was so dirty. It's black,
Right.
So the guy I texted, who usually comes and washes, he wasn't available for at least 3 days. So I'm like, I'm just gonna do it. So I went outside and I started washing my truck, and I started having this thought that was like kept on flowing, and it's like, why do you think the borders opened up and my family, so many people from where I come from, which is Ukraine and the former Soviet Union, why were the borders open? Why are we here?
Right.
For what
Right.
reason? Then I'm like, well, I remember when I was a kid, we had to prove that we are Christian, and we were persecuted
Mm-hmm.
because during communism, former Soviet Union, like they did not want Christianity to
Thrive there.
to thrive there.
Yeah.
They were the guy who was the president of former USSR. He said, "We will show on national TV the last Christian."
Mm.
So they were persecuting. They were locking up those who like preached and spread the gospel, and all that. So even my grandfather was my dad told me stories where he was beaten with the key by the teacher in the classroom because he found out he was Christian, and he was putting him down, humiliating. It was just terrible. And so anyway, so at first I thought that, hey, God wanted us to have this freedom to practice our faith, right? To worship in freedom and not be persecuted.
Mm.
But then as I'm washing the truck, I'm thinking, that's not the reason.
Mm-mm.
How many people in this world die because of their belief, because of their faith?
Mm.
So are we some special people in former Soviet Union that God said, hey, I'm taking you guys in here, and now you guys can... No, that's not really why. So then why? And I started remembering multiple conversations that I've had here in America with someone who grew up here, who already had their kids here in America. And whenever we touched on values, life in general, very often someone would say something like this to me. They're like, Paul, this is something that our kids are missing. Like this stuff you guys came from over there, and you guys have this understanding and your values. Like this is what this country is missing. And I heard this time after time. And then I said, what if during the time of freedom and comfort, people in this country have really relaxed,
Right.
and sort of lost focus and started losing faith and started
Entitlement
getting into
grew.
all vices, right, and stuff.
Mhm.
And maybe this is why is because maybe we came here and we have that, and we can share, we can maybe influence, we can make an impact
Right.
on some of our communities here, so that so that this nation thrives. Because if this continues, we know that it's true that they said that good times produce weak men.
Right.
Weak men make
Hard times.
hard times. Hard times creates strong men, and then strong men create
Good times.
good times, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this cycle. And then it kind of really hit me. I'm like, yes, this is why. Now I really wholeheartedly believe that is the reason why we are here.
Yes. And so that's a huge thing about purpose for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you don't have to, for you, it makes perfect sense in context of your story. But I also think that other people who don't have that story but can understand it and love it can also similarly live it if they choose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. You can choose to be a strong man or woman even if you're living in good times. It's just
Yes.
less likely when you have the distractions and the vices and
Well, you don't have the necessity.
yeah.
It's like if you're being persecuted, it's like, well, you better be up to it. And you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
But when you have a choice, it's like, okay, well, then you need to make the choice to be a good person. You need to make the choice to be a strong man. You need to seek out the adversity. It's like if you're working in the field all the time, you're gonna be strong. But if you're working at the desk all the time, you have to go to the gym.
Exactly. See, and
You still have to put in the work.
yes. When I look at like the founding of this nation, United States, and I know this story about George Washington when he made that decision to cross. Was it the
Potomac?
yes?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. I believe that's the river in
The
Maryland.
Delaware.
Yeah.
So that was a very pivotal moment in this nation's history. If he did not make that decision, even though a lot of people did not agree with him, they said it was a bad idea.
Mm.
But he made that decision. And I think in our life, there's always these moments where it's that decision, like that one decision away from making that pivotal moment, right? And during that time, when we go back to George Washington, right, there was, I would say, like a handful of people there, like the founding fathers, were responsible for this making of this nation.
Sure.
Yeah.
You had to have courage, you had to have
Grit.
grit, you had to have determination, you had to have faith that whatever that you're doing, it's gonna succeed. Like belief that something that you're not seeing yet is the outcome in your future.
Mm-hmm.
And at bare minimum, even if you will not live to see the fruits of that labor, having, the clarity and confidence that foundation can be built upon.
And this is something that's in our society is missing right now. I want to read a quote, if you don't mind. This
Please.
is something that I wanted to bring this up. And what you just said is a good, very good, how do you say when you...
Segue? Or
I guess there's a way that Steve... Anyway, I don't want to go into
That's what I mean.
but I'm going to say, okay, so give me just a second. Okay. Society grows great when men plant trees in whose shade they shall never sit.
Yeah.
So with that mindset, with that approach in life, this is something that I think is missing in the larger scale.
The selflessness and the wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's me generation. I want something that's going to help me right now. For me, am I comfortable, That's why I always say, when you look at what's been happening in this nation, I know this is a little off topic, but
It's fine.
the direction of the United States as a nation, where it's headed, and all the forces that are influencing it, and not just here in America. I think this is a global situation. It's, imagine this: you take away, let's say, God, right? You remove, prayer or the reading of scriptures in schools, So let's say you remove God from society, from communities. You influence, let's say, promote, and I know it's going to be a little bit controversial, but my wife sometimes tells me, "You be careful. You have multiple businesses."
Right.
But I made
once again the authentic.
I made a decision not too long ago that I cannot, like, there's certain things that I want to speak up, and if someone does not agree with me, it's fine. I totally respect everyone's position and opinions. So going back to what I was saying, remove God, promote other lifestyles and abortion, so that there's no
kids.
There's no kids, right? So what does that mean? That means that there's no future.
Well, the tree of life is dying.
So think about it.
Yeah.
If I live my whole life and all I cared about is myself, my comfort, how I feel, I don't have anyone to take care of as far as my kids. There's no future. I know that I die and I'm gone. I don't believe that there's life after death. Why do I care what happens right now in this world?
Yeah.
Right.
Why am I going to put in a lot of effort in fixing or planting those trees that under which shade I'm not gonna, rest?
Yeah.
Why would I care?
Yeah.
I don't care. So imagine if on a massive scale you're influencing the world to go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, I just saw a study, and this is a little bit older, a couple years old study, and it's like asking kids between the ages of 20 and 30, what are your top 10 priorities? And it's like, make a boatload of money, own a house, be fit. And then like number 13 is have kids. And it's like, going back to the first part of this conversation, you're missing out on a whole opportunity to learn what it is to live, because you're only ever living for yourself. There's no responsibility. There's no moment of looking down in your kid's eyes and being like, holy cow, what have I gotten into? There's no going back. I have to be better. It's all selfish. It's all internally focused. It's all just me, my own little island, and how I feel. And it's like, we live in a society. You can't live like that. And if you're taking away one of the most fundamental natural paths to understand that we live in a society, which is your offspring, then you're going to remove that responsibility and things are going to go bad. Like it just can't go any other way.
And especially what we saw during COVID, when anything that had to do with community, with people being together, right?
Yeah.
Let's take that away, and now you're by yourself at home behind a keyboard, and it's very easy to type away your point of view on a keyboard and send or post, right? But in reality, life is life. There are certain things that people fought for. They bled, they died for certain freedoms, for rights, and that takes sacrifice. That takes, for someone who, that's why I have so much respect for anyone who is either an entrepreneur who is sacrificing their health, a lot of their sleepless nights and everything to make things happen. Like, look at Elon Musk, right? Like just what he has gone through, and now that he's sort of became part of the Doge team, like now he's having now it's even worse for him. But but that's what he's solving for. That's what he signed up for. Yeah. People who served in the military, who have died, the families who, all of they're selfless.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that worries me about our society right now, is that not only do we not respect, but it's almost like more and more people are forgetting where the good things and the good times came from to begin with.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're like, the government will take care of it. And I'm like, where do you think the government like gets its money? Like, where, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it's like, well, taxes. And you're like, okay, fine. Well, who paid the taxes? It's like, well, people who are working, you know, property owners, people, you know, capital gains taxpayers, people who are making things happen in the real world, right? And it's like, you can't have a sustainable system when more and more people stop being producers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You can't, no matter how much or how little government is involved. Government's just an extra step, right? Often wasteful step.
Well, and the government's made up of people.
Right.
And so if like all of the people are relying on the government, then the government's relying on itself. And it's like, okay, well, we've got the snake eating its tail.
Yeah.
Just no bueno.
And so the overarching theme that I'm actually seeing in this whole conversation is that like the attitude matters.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
You know, it matters to Paul when he's, you know, getting his franchise started, you know, and he's stressed out to the T, and it matters to anybody who's starting a business, and it matters for even the people who aren't entrepreneurs. It's like you have to understand your influence in the world is bigger than you think it is.
Yep.
And that's hard to accept, I think, sometimes, because I feel like we're burdened with our problems and dealing with them, and to zoom out, to have that perspective of knowing that your decisions matter, and your decisions come from your attitude, you know? And so I think that for our society, best chances for our society is for everybody who can manage to have a better attitude absolutely should. And it does affect the other people around them to have a better attitude as well, right? And so that's why we like to associate ourselves with good friends who we know take on positive attitudes. And sometimes we even go to events and conferences just to expose ourselves to people with good attitudes. And that's where, you know, the self-help industry is booming right now. And I think I find some hope in that, because there are a lot of influential people in this world right now, you know.
There is, and I think it's a good thing, and it also could be a sort of a bad thing, because I think with easy access to so much information, different voices, sometimes there's just too many voices that you're hearing, and then the task becomes, okay, how do I narrow down, and whose voice do I listen to, right? I mean, look how quickly someone like Andrew Tate blew up on the internet, right?
Right.
Can I say that he is a good role model for young guys?
No.
I can't say that, you know.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's certain voices that are more louder, bolder. So that's what I think. The people who have the right values, who have a voice, should use that opportunity to make a difference and impact in their communities. And I know that this is kind of what you guys are doing with this podcast. So it's you talked about the attitude, right? Like the importance of having the right attitude. I think it's so important for someone who is maybe right now kind of not happy where they're at, whether it's in finances, spiritual life, health-wise, right? It's all about making small steps. You don't have to look at it as a massive mountain that you have to climb. Step by step, what can I do today to incrementally change my situation and start heading in the right direction? For me, for example, when I started taking my health more seriously, it's a matter of this. Like, I'm at home, I open up my pantry, right? I feel like having a snack. And there's like a lot of different things that I can grab, right? And making that decision instead of some chips or something sweet, I'll grab let's say pistachios or something like that, right? Like making those little small, because I know what my goal is. I know where I'm trying to go. And
why would you make any decision?
Why would I? Because, and I also think about, like, in the future, I know that if I do this right now, tomorrow, I'm going to regret this decision.
Right.
And I don't want to do that.
Right.
Tomorrow, I want to feel good about the decisions that I made today. So because I'm trying to avoid the regret tomorrow, that is even enough for me to make the right decision today.
It's the act of self-denial is really the call of life.
Yeah.
Really? And it's like, whether it's pistachios instead of Doritos, or it's complimenting somebody instead of keeping to yourself, or making a helpful suggestion instead of keeping to yourself, or sharing a powerful story instead of keeping it to yourself, or some things I think about is like, if I can make a good situation better, or a situation better for somebody else, you're sort of, first of all, that feels good, right? But also, they will appreciate that about you. They will remember that, and you're putting out good positive energy, if you will. I don't really have another way to say it. It's like goodwill into the world, and that does come back to you. And I feel sorry for the people that don't understand that self-denial doesn't mean only losing something, right? It's like indirect gain.
Yeah, you are sowing something, and
gardening.
When you're putting a seed in the ground and you're covered it, you don't go back the next day and feel very disappointed because you don't see a fruit or a vegetable there.
Right.
You know that the process of the natural process, it's days and days until something comes out from the ground, and then also the whole process of watering it, nurturing it, so that it actually produces the result. Same thing goes with everything else in life.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I think that was a solid episode.
I enjoyed it.
I think we can end it right there.
Yeah.
It's like attitude is everything, and
by the way,
said in so many different ways.
I'll make a really small suggestion, a book recommendation.
Yes, I would love this.
The last part that we just talked about is written in the book Power versus Force. And when I read that book, I was like, my eyes opened up as to like why certain things are happening, why certain people in my life are this way. It's all about the energy we put out, the thoughts that we nurture, what we focus on, the attitude that we choose to have, and just everything else.
It sounds like an echo of the story of Moses with his staff, deciding to strike the rock
instead of using his words.
Instead of using his words and inviting the water to flow forth from it. Instead, he decides to use force and hit it, and it's like, well, that's it for you, buddy.
Yeah,
like,
no promised land for you.
Looks like you've been listening to a lot of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that was yesterday. His appearance on Joe Rogan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he brought it up. But that's what I love about podcasting is, well, listening to podcasts, but also having conversations, being a part of conversations, and it helps us synthesize information, and it helps us, like, for example, you have a bunch of knowledge, you've read books, you've talked to people, but every time you have another conversation or read another book, it solidifies and reminds you of the important information that we lose sight of when we, let's say, start falling off course a little bit.
Yes.
Because that you can spiral upward or downward, and ultimately that's going to be your decision.
100%. I agree with that.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, Paul.
Of course.
Yeah, it's really good talking to you.
Thank you so much for inviting.
Absolutely.
I was looking forward to it again sometime.
It was a blast. Thank you.
Yep.